Welcome to the Exchange Daily Update for Wednesday, December 10th, 2025. This show is for CIOs, CISOs, CTOs, and public sector technology leaders who are trying to keep one step ahead of AI policy, cybersecurity threats, and infrastructure shifts that actually move your roadmap. Today, we're looking at a looming White House executive order on state AI laws, a new wave of child safety rules that could reshape AI companions, a joint cyber advisory on pro-Russia hacktivists, and the Pentagon's first large-scale rollout of generative AI. We'll also touch on big moves in data streaming and enterprise AI services that will change how you think about your next platform decisions. Let's get into it. At the top of the stack is the Trump administration's push for a single national rule on AI that would preempt the patchwork of state laws. The White House is signaling an executive order that would effectively override many state-level AI protections, framing it as a way to give companies one clear standard instead of 50 conflicting ones. Supporters argue that the current landscape is unworkable for national and global platforms, especially in sectors like finance, healthcare, and education that touch multiple states. Critics in Congress and state houses see it as an overreach that strips away hard-won consumer protection, civil rights, and child safety laws at the state level. For technology leaders, this is the moment to map your compliance posture across key states and ask what it would mean if your baseline shifted from the strictest state rules to a more centralized federal standard. Running in parallel is a fast-moving policy fight over AI companions and kids that's now playing out in both Congress and California. In the Senate, the GUARD Act is picking up bipartisan co-sponsors as it aims to ban AI companions for minors, require clear disclosure that chatbots are not human, and create criminal penalties for systems that target kids with sexualized content. In California, OpenAI is backing a ballot initiative that would lock in its preferred version of the AI Companion Chatbot Safety Act as a counter to a tougher proposal from Common Sense and child safety advocates. If both measures end up on the ballot, or if the federal bill advances, you could end up with overlapping or conflicting rules about age verification, parental controls, and what counts as harm in AI interactions with minors. If your organization builds or buys any AI that touches younger users, now is the time to inventory those use cases. Check how you're verifying age today, and make sure your product and legal teams are aligned on where this is headed. On the cyber front, CISA, the FBI, the NSA, and international partners have issued a joint advisory warning about pro-Russia hacktivist groups taking opportunistic shots at critical infrastructure. These actors are leaning on noisy but disruptive tactics like DDoS, website defacements, and probing exposed services, looking for weak points across utilities, transport, healthcare, and government networks. The advisory is less about a single zero day and more about reminding defenders that basic hygiene and monitoring still matter when the threat is loud and politically motivated. It calls for tightening external attack surfaces, validating DDoS protections, and making sure your incident playbooks and communication plans are ready for nuisance-level disruptions that can still shake public confidence. If you're responsible for critical infrastructure, this is a good excuse to confirm that your upstream providers and internal teams know exactly who does what when the next hacktivist splash page or DDoS wave hits. Over at the Pentagon, the Department of Defense is moving from pilots to a broad deployment of generative AI with a new GenAI.mil platform powered initially by Google's Gemini. The rollout is focused on unclassified use cases like drafting and summarizing policy documents, automating parts of onboarding, and speeding up contract and compliance workflows rather than operational targeting. Even so, it marks a real milestone in how a national defense organization is willing to integrate frontier models into day-to-day work at scale, backed by a substantial cloud and AI contract. DoD is emphasizing controls around data classification and assurances that inputs into the system won't be used to train public models, which will be a recurring theme for other agencies. For your own environment, this is a signal that generative AI, as a shared internal service, is moving from if to how fast, under what guardrails, and with which vendor footprint. In the private sector, IBM's decision to acquire Confluent for around $11 billion is another sign that the AI era is really a data streaming era at its core. The deal is about more than just a managed Kafka service. It's IBM betting that an end-to-end platform for streaming, governing, and connecting data in real time is a prerequisite for serious AI agents and event-driven applications. For governments and regulated enterprises that already rely on Kafka-style pipelines, this raises questions about concentration risk, vendor lock-in, and where your data plane really lives. It also means that legacy data architectures that still treat streaming as an add-on are going to be under pressure as AI workloads demand fresher, more connected signals. If you haven't already, it's worth asking your data and architecture teams how ready your streaming infrastructure is to support the kinds of agentic workflows and real-time analytics that leadership is starting to assume will just work. There's also a major services story unfolding as Accenture and Anthropic deepen their multi-year partnership to move enterprises from AI pilots into production-scale programs. On paper, the deal wraps Anthropic's Claude models in a comprehensive consulting and delivery framework, with Accenture promising to harden governance, integrate with existing data platforms, and build repeatable patterns for industry-specific use cases. In practice, it means a lot more large organizations will be turning to a packaged playbook for AI transformation instead of assembling their own from scratch. That can accelerate outcomes, but it also raises the stakes for how you manage risk, ensure vendor independence, and keep internal talent from atrophying behind a services-led model. If you work with a global integrator, this is a good time to revisit your AI roadmap, clarify who owns which layers of the stack, and get very explicit about how value, risk, and learning are going to be shared. That's it for today's Exchange Daily Update. As always, the goal here isn't to chase every headline, but to surface the moves that should shape your next questions to your team, your vendors, and your leadership. Take a moment to decide which of these stories deserves a follow-up in your next staff meeting or steering committee. Thanks for listening to today's Exchange Daily. We'll talk tomorrow.